thank you, Michele, for joining us at the Digital Onboarding Summit. It's been amazing to have got to know you in the past few months. I think we've only met maybe this year, but I'm looking forward to having a conversation because you're really passionate about what you do and the field that you worked in. So maybe we can get started off with a short introduction. You can make it short, you can make it long, because you've had a ton of different experience at some amazing companies. So I'll let you introduce yourself and then we can take it from there.
Great. Thank you. And thanks for having me. I'm really been enjoying getting to know you these past few months as well. And I'm excited about your product and your passion around onboarding and employee experience and all of that. So thanks. I'm a former Chief Talent Officer for the Shared Service Center at Publicis Group. I recently left there, and I've got a long career in multiple industries in HR. I've worked in banking. I've worked in insurance. I've worked in music, which turned into technology, which also was a rights management company because we issued licenses on behalf of music publishers to use music. And then I wound up in media. So a very diverse background in terms of industries and different points of growth and transformation. Some of the companies I worked for instance, like Publicis, I was brought on to transform the organization and increase employee engagement. I grew up in Citibank, but then I went to Prudential to help take them public, and then got a call right before IPO, well, I should say probably a year before the IPO, to go help transform a music company that was 75 years old and get it to be client-centric and tech-centric. So varied experiences in different organizations, different industries at different times of growth and transformation. So it's been super cool, and the issues are different everywhere. But when you have people, that's what happens, right? You have people, you have issues, you have challenges, and nothing is the same.
Yeah, no, I can't wait to dive into some of those experiences. To start, maybe I'm very curious to know what got you into HR in the first place. Was it a plan? Did you just stumble into the field? How did that happen?
Yeah, I'm a stumbler in, like a lot of people. I was a communications major, marketing and advertising, and during college I had 2 summer internships for Xerox, and it was in their HR department. So I just happened to want a paying job for the summer, and I got business skills and learned a little bit about HR. Got a job out of school for Citibank working in their real estate department, the people who were the real estate folks for all the stores and shops at the market at Citicorp Center. So the building with the slanted roofs got all sorts of shops in there. We were the landlords. And I got in a career development program there and took a job where I was marketing internal jobs. So I was almost like I was talent acquisition person, very junior for non-exempt jobs across Citibank. So back then, I'm really dating myself, but it was a dial-up phone system. You would call up and hear about open jobs and apply for them. And working at Citibank was so huge, it was like applying out in the street. So was able to really cut my teeth in talent acquisition, and that's kind of how it started. Then got a job as a generalist, then progressed up the ladder, then took on different roles. So quite by accident, thought I'd be a marketing advertising person and wound up, I market people. I kind of do it, but my product is people. So I always tell people I'm a business person and my product is the human element of everything. So
yeah. No, it's amazing that you say that because at Tidy we always say that like HR now is partially sales and partially marketing because you are actually selling your organization to new hires. And then once they join, you're actually marketing a lot of different of the company's internal products and benefits to your internal employees to keep them motivated, right? So it needs both of those aspects to keep that HR discipline afloat.
You're so spot on. And what people fail to realize, and I will say HR people and line managers, is when you have an opening and someone's interviewing with you, the market is so hot, and particularly for the more junior folks, right? They're doing as much buying as they are selling. They're looking to see if you're right for them. So what happens is, my experience is a lot of managers, a lot of HR people tend to think, well, if you're interviewing for this job, you need me more than I need you. And that's not the case. And people have a lot of opportunities these days. So you really have to always put your best foot forward, and you have to do as much selling as an HR person and a line manager as you do as a candidate.
Yeah.
It's not just because someone's sitting in your doorway, particularly if you go after the passive candidate. Someone who wasn't looking, you found them by accident, you meet them, you are loving what you see. They're waiting to say, well, should I leave what I have to come to you, and why should I do that? And you really have to be a salesperson to really get the right talent in there. So you're so spot on with that.
Yeah, and as I've discovered, HR as a discipline, there's definitely so many different facets to it. In some way, it's a little nebulous because sometimes HR consists of talent, consists of a lot of administrative compliance-related things, but also some companies include learning and development. And today, there's a lot of companies calling the HR teams people and culture. So the role of HR has definitely broadened, I'm sure. And I'd love to kind of hear your experience in how you think HR has transformed over the years.
Yeah, sure. And it's transformed, and we still have a way to go. So when I started, and there are many organizations that are still like this, HR was the social worker of the crowd, right? It was planning the parties. It was worrying about all those kind of soft things that people, like to have, which are important. And the administrative things, the paperwork, right? The compliance aspect of it. You have an opening, get the rec signed, move it along the process, onboarding paperwork, all of that. But HR has worked really hard over the last 20 years to prove themselves as viable business partners, meaning we need to understand our clients, the internal clients. We need to understand the external clients and what's going to make those external clients successful. And that's how HR people need to develop talent. How do we create jobs that are sexy enough, that challenge people's skills and abilities, where they feel like they're growing and they're contributing to client success, while also filling a need internally, because you can't always do everything you want. There's things you have to do and things you want to do. So we've worked really hard to say that we understand the business, we understand the financials, we understand the impact of a new client or losing a client, so that we can have a voice at the table. And I hate cliches, but that's really it, or a seat at the table to say, yes, you're looking to acquire this, but this is what you need to look at in terms of talent. Here's where we have a gap. Here's where we have skills that will really be good on a sales call to pitch a new client. So we've had to work hard that way, but we're still not there. And I think what we're seeing a lot of, and you and I travel in a lot of the same circles, is that we're seeing a lot of focus on the human element, people's mindset, how they're treated, being their authentic self, bringing your whole self to work. Yeah. So that's almost a swing back in a way to look at people only, but it's so needed because the pendulum is gone. We're social workers, we're hardcore business people, and now we kind of have to bring the soul of it back and say, focus on folks. The world is different. It doesn't look the way it did a decade ago. It doesn't look the way it did 5 years ago. And how do we create a work environment that plays to what the world is today? And so it's a challenge. I think it's a mixture of both. The admin work, look, it's got to be done. No one likes it. But maybe companies like yours make it easier, where it's automated versus all the paper and it's more interactive. Right. But that's kind of how it's changed. So I think we're swinging back now to pay more attention to the human element.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting metaphor. You talk about the pendulum because in some way people have almost forgotten that HR started off in that space where it was all about like the softer aspects, because a lot of people now remember it on the compliance side, and everybody kind of hates HR from that perspective, that HR is all about paperwork, HR is all about telling me what to do, telling me the rules and telling me the policies. But I think you're right. Like now, they are kind of we've come to a point where HR is finding that like right balance where business people respect HR and employees understand that HR is on their side. Many times I've spoken to people like, no, HR is always on the company's side, and that might have been true only because of the function of compliance. But I think, from the beginning, like you said, very early on, HR was to support employees and their needs. But that was over time, as it became function or core function of an organization, got burdened with more and more responsibilities which were administrative, and that overshadowed everything else that HR did in the beginning.
Totally. And, no self-respecting HR person will tell you they love the compliance end of it. No one likes to be a police officer. There's things we have to do just by law, right? Reporting, what have you. But what we're trying to do is really help you achieve what you want through talent. And for me, I view HR as the biggest cheerleaders of the staff. And I'm sorry people don't always see that, because the last thing we want to do is spend the time and money to bring somebody on, to see them fail and not do well and not have an interest in them. So, that just makes more work for us. We have to go back to the bureaucracy of exit interviews, turnover reports, reopening a rec, going through this. So no one likes that.
Yeah.
We really want to focus on the people, and like any profession, we're talking about HR, but like any profession, there's good, there's bad. There's people you can trust, people you can't trust. And our job as professionals, no matter what you do, is to earn the trust and credibility. Yeah. And it's an ongoing thing. It's never going to be done. It's going to be an ongoing challenge.
Yeah, no, I agree. And this brings me to the employee experience side, because like you said, you are an evangelist for all employees. And I was curious if you in your career saw a very kind of clear rise of when employee experience became a part of the business agenda, because it seems very recent. We hear about it a lot. It is almost trendy now for companies to talk about employee experience, but we know there's some truth behind it, and it is very important. But have you seen that shift at a very particular point in your career?
I think I spent 15 years at the company before Publicis, where we were smaller. We were about 150 people down to 120. And then I went to Publicis, where it's like, thousands. And we had to transform a place that we were a company that people did not like in the industry. We were the only game in town. And the prior leadership was always about no, versus being service oriented. Mm-hmm. And the internet was just starting then and being tech savvy and all of that. So we had a challenge back then, and this was in 2001, 2002, to market ourselves as a place people wanted to be. I couldn't get people originally to even apply there for a job. So we had to care about experience. So I will say personally, I saw it in this organization where really transforming a company, it was paramount. And we said, how do we get people to want to be here? Well, hire the right people who think the same way, and that they value talent and they want people to be here. So that was early 2000s. Then as things went on, and we did a lot of things which we'll talk about, I'm sure, during this call that, increased, the experience. But then employee satisfaction was a big term then. Now it became employee engagement. And what's happening in employee engagement surveys is employees are being very vocal about how they were treated during an interview, how they were onboarded, right? What their orientations were like. Yeah. And in my last job, we got messages saying, hey, you can improve there, and we set out and we did some things that really changed the experience. But we saw it being an organization that had to transform itself back in the early 2000s. And I think it was tied to different things, but we were acutely aware of it. And I think as engagement has gone on is the buzz term, and now we talk about purpose and all that, it's really important. And with a hot job market, you have to care.
Yeah.
Can't be buzzwords.
Yeah, that's true. You mentioned a little bit about the difference between the 150-person organization and the large kind of organization. As you moved on to Publicis, what were the challenges you faced there?
The challenges were, it was just a larger organization and it was global. So, we had people in different geographies, and it was, geographies across the United States. And what has happened in the last, I would say 5 years is the ability for people to work remotely more, right? I know my last company, we didn't entertain that at all. I went to visit them last week. Almost no one was in the office. I said, where are they? They said, they work from home now. I go, we changed some more. So the challenge is, how do you onboard people and make them feel part of a culture when they're in different geographies? Because when you're a shared service center, you are supporting people, your agency clients all over the United States. So it's, how do I feel like I'm part of this? and I was onboarded and feel, and it's a challenge when you don't come into the office every day to feel a part of something, and that's where we have to use technology differently.
Yeah. And
more effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the premise of Tidy. When we started it, we realized that every company was in some way distributed. You would either have colleagues in different cities or even in the same city have different offices. So you were never in the same location at all times. And therefore, all these in-person orientations and inductions, while they're good for smaller organizations, there's a certain threshold where that becomes that is a good thing and it creates a bond. But over time, we need to kind of innovate to use mixed mediums. You need to use partial in-person relationship building and use technology to make it efficient, but also build relationships. And that's really what triggered us to start Tidy and create an onboarding solution, which can be used at any kind of scale of a company. So I'm glad you kind of mentioned that. I'm curious about the things that you did in your previous company, where you said you had to do something to make sure employees got attracted to the internal culture. Mm-hmm. So what were those things that you did?
And I'll talk about just my last 2 jobs because I can go through a very long period of career history. But in the smaller company, because we all cared and we were interested in changing the reputation of the organization in the marketplace, attracting a different kind of candidate and attracting people, period, because we couldn't have that happen, was really an openness of the leadership team to be involved wherever they could in terms of interviewing people. Mm-hmm. And, that in itself, when you have commitment top down, that's how most things succeed, right? You can't, as an HR practitioner, think you want to do something and it just works. You really need to get buy-in from the top down. And that's been my approach, is really to suggest things, get buy-in, or get suggestions for tweaking it a bit so everyone feels comfortable and then rolling it out. I'm not one to just say I'm doing this. I really look to get consensus. So senior leadership involvement was key. An interviewing process that made sense. So we tended to do things where I like people in and out fast, meaning people's time is valuable. They can't take off every day to interview. Get everybody in on one day, have interviewing panels, meaning not a group interview, but I go from you to the next person to the next person. So we're efficient that we can debrief and we can get back to people quickly. Yeah. And key is getting back to people because, again, you and I travel in the same circles. We read how people do not get back to candidates. The application's one thing, but even after they interview, they're ghosted. Yeah. So we made sure we always got back to people. We did it timely. We said, if you don't hear from us by this date, call us. We're not bothered by it. So it's really being open and meaning it, right? And being authentic about it because they have lives to plan and remembering it's not all about us. And I think that's key. You have to have that respect. So the interviewing process, the candidate experience was important to us. And then if we hire you, what do? We have an orientation day one. We'd have someone from the HR team bring the person around to meet everyone. We'd set them up with a buddy to take them to lunch. Mm-hmm. I mean, we'd do things like that where they weren't sitting around reading the handbook for a day waiting for work. Yeah. We'd have all the technology taken care of. We'd have meetings set up for them so they can go around and meet key people and spend time with them their first couple of days. So those are some things I did at the smaller company. At Publicis, we had a global orientation program that we could tailor for each region. We created in North America a buddy system. So people signed up for this. We created a buddy, I don't want to say job description, but kind of if you want to be a buddy, this is what it is. And the beauty of that was, again, talking about remote locations, is you didn't have to sit in the same place as someone. Mm-hmm. So you had to respect the different geographies, and you could clearly have someone who's a buddy in one place be a buddy with another. We would try to do it in the same geography, but it wasn't necessary for success. You just couldn't have lunch with that person. But, that's what we put forth. You put forth, a curriculum where they would be able to do some learning. We had in both organizations internal learning, whether it's HFA University, resources, IQ, where people can come in and learn about different departments. We did whatever we could to make somebody feel like they didn't have so much of a honeymoon period, that they felt like they were part of the family right away.
Yeah, and also accomplishing something very early, right? Like when they feel like they're learning very early, as opposed to feeling deadbeat in the first 2 days, they almost feel useless. And I think they really, like what we kind of see is that the energy of new hires is the highest during, even like before starting, and then maybe during the first month. That's when they want to participate. That's when they have a lot of ideas. And it's so important to listen to them, because they have that. I think what's a great advantage of getting new hires into your company is that they're going to be able to give you a perspective from the outside that is going to help you improve. And listening to that perspective is so important. So I really like what you said about valuing their time and respecting them, because there is that part where we can't take them for granted just because we've hired them. In some way, they are the ones who are going to come into the company and carry us forward. Right. Yeah. So I think that's really important to kind of show that they are valued even before day one, as soon as they, commit to being a part of your company. And actually what you mentioned was, even before, when you're interviewing, you wanted to make sure that you showed that respect, that, you value their time. So I actually thought that was really interesting. I'm curious, what are the few things that the buddies were responsible for?
The buddies we gave them templates, when I had people on my team, I picked millennials on my team to set this up, because this is something millennials are super passionate about. But they would get guides on the business, to be able to show org charts, to be able to show floor plans of different places, to take pieces of the orientation program. If they were in the same building, tour them around, introduce them to people. So it was that type of thing. Of course, a meal. We always like to feed someone if we can. But it was really to be the point person, to regularly check in with them. So I was a buddy, I think twice when I was at my last job. So, which is not really, normal for the head of HR to be the buddy, but it's like, what, we need more people to do it. We do it. And I would set up monthly check-ins, because it's a 3-month assimilation. I would set up monthly check-ins with the person. They knew to contact me, and it's, how can I help you? What do you need to know? What's been challenging? What's been great? Give me some feedback. And I should say, outside of a buddy program, when I was at HFA, we had a regular 3-month check-in. So people did questionnaires. We met with them afterwards so we could figure out how to enhance the onboarding and assimilation program even more. So it's really a lot of checking in and remembering you have a buddy, because sometimes a buddy just gets assimilated quickly and forgets, or they don't want to bother you. Yeah. It's really important as a buddy to proactively reach out, take that role seriously, be an advocate for them, be a safe place for them, right? Because, look, I've heard from people, this is not what I thought. Okay, well, did you talk to your boss? You give advice, you give career advice, or you introduce them to someone else who can maybe help them with the issue. And it's really having that piece of connection and best interest in the person as a buddy. So formal and informal stuff.
Yeah. And one of the, when you say this, it reminds me of the engagement surveys that we were talking about a few minutes earlier. And one of the biggest challenges I found in my own experience when I filled these engagement surveys was, it's fine. I'd give my 15, 20 minutes. It takes a lot of time. Sometimes there were too many questions. But there was no follow-up, and there was no response. And I think what you're saying about these check-ins, and I'm curious to hear a couple of anecdotes from you, is about how the responsiveness of an organization, when you are asking for something, when you're asking for feedback, I think it's important to respond. We've heard you, or we're going to make these changes. So in your experience, did any of those check-ins yield in the organization responding and making changes?
Well, it's interesting because people don't necessarily like to do those surveys for the reasons you cited, and they believe nothing comes of it. So I have 2 experiences that I'll talk about. When I joined HFA, the music company that had to really transform, when I got there, I said to the CEO, there's a bad vibe here. We're really shaking up a place. We need to do an employee satisfaction survey, and we need to hear the tough stuff. So we do a survey. Now, back then, people didn't even trust it. They wanted to fax it in, snail mail it in. They didn't want to do it online. The consultants called me and said, Michele, what's going on there? These are the worst results we've ever seen in our lives. And the verbatims are so mean-spirited. I said, well, we are really taking a 75-year-old company that's been one way for so long and radically changing it and telling people to behave differently, right? Not necessarily do different work yet, but behave differently, value the customer. And this kind of change makes people nervous. So we get the results and they are abysmal. I mean, honestly, seriously, terrible. And I went through them with the senior team, and we were devastated because they said things about people, negative things that named people. And I said, we need to share the results with the employees, and you all need to sit there and we need to have open dialogue. Now, this is back in the early 2000s, which was, not yesterday, but not so far long ago. And we bring everybody in and I go through the results. And I mean, I am showing horrible results. And the employees were shocked that we shared it, shocked that we were sitting there all hearing it at the same time, right? Because no one trusted it. And then we created employee satisfaction ambassadors. So we said, but we can't do this alone. We're going to ask you to appoint one person per department, pick top 2 items because we had departmental reports, the most important issues for you, and let's work together on increasing satisfaction. We went from 51% to 82% in like 3 years, which that's cultural change does take that kind of time. So it was huge. When I got to Publicis Group, they had just done a survey and they'd just given the results out. And I was brought on and I said, what are you doing about employee sat? They said, well, we have the execs working on some initiatives. I said, well, you know what? They just told all of you they're not happy with some of these areas, and one of them was onboarding. Why don't you let me own it? You can be the executive sponsors and let me create an employee satisfaction engagement ambassador role, and we'll get volunteers to help us with this. We put it out there. We got 60 volunteers across the United States.
Wow.
They broke up into committees. They came up with initiatives. They presented them to executive management. That's how we rolled out a buddy program, a mentor program, an internal learning tool, regular communications. All came from the employees.
Yeah.
But it was sharing results, saying, we hear you, we care, we want you to be part of the solution, and we'll support you, which kind of talks to servant leadership, which is very big right now. It's like, don't do what I tell you to do. Tell me what support you need to make this a better place to work. So those, that's what we've seen, change in engagement and really involving people bottom up.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I think the Publicis example is interesting because, like you said, it's a large organization. It's hard to make change there. What do you think are the key things that leadership or executives are looking for to really invest in that change? Because one of the biggest challenges is that these changes take time, right? So you can't just show the ROI of something like this in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So in your experience, whether it is yours or whether it's with people you've spoken to, what are the things that some of the people have done that help executives understand the value of investing in a good employee experience, let it be onboarding, whether it is a buddy program or any other relationship building initiatives like that?
Yeah, I will tell you at HFA, and Publicis did some great stuff because really, when I look at the global nature of it, they put together, the resources piece, and it was led by someone overseas, this global onboarding and orientation, which really educated people. When you work in something so overwhelming, it's great to see that there's one place where you can go for information. And it's not just your benefits, right? It's not just how do I elect my health and welfare and, how many vacation days do I get, but really learning about the business. So to do that globally is huge. And there was a huge commitment there by management to do that. So that was great. The smaller companies, we had to explain what turnover meant. When you can point to numbers and metrics and everything, data rules for people. And when you particularly support operational folks who work around numbers all the time, it can't just be a feeling, it's facts. So giving numbers around exit interviews, content from exit interviews, turnover numbers, or feedback on people who are promoted and their career path, looking at mentor programs and the success of that and how people achieved what they did, was key to get people to buy into it. If you see your area's got chronic turnover, you have to then look and say, what can I do differently as a leader to make this more appealing and make people want to stay? And am I doing all I can? And I have to realize that management leadership takes time. And I can't just worry about all the operational areas. I've got to spend time on talent. The accessibility, again, in a smaller company, it's easier, but the accessibility of management, whether it's mid-management, senior management, to employees to be able to chat and talk and get issues out on the table is key. And we're able, in a smaller company, it's easier to do that when you're all in one location. The challenge comes when you're across the United States or global. How do you do that? And it's really figuring how to use the technology and feel the connection. So we were able to really do that with, commitment from management, data, and real interaction. And I know people would say to me, I can't believe the CEO just came over and asked me how I was doing and what did I do for the weekend, and just connecting. And that means a lot to people. It's feeling of belonging, which is very important to millennials. So if you have a high millennial workplace, that's what you need to do.
Yeah, and as I've been engaging with different people in different conversations, and we talk about technology and HR, increasingly what ends up happening is that we realize that the more technology that is getting embedded in the workplace, in some way the focus on the human needs is also increasing. Although people aren't talking about that, but there is a strong correlation in it. And one of our customers actually really gave us a good anecdote about that. They said that with the structured onboarding and automating a lot of the content delivery and introductions and things like that, when an employee came in on day one or in week one, the sessions were a lot more interactive because they came in, they were already informed. All they came in was with more questions. So the induction was less about somebody showing a PowerPoint presentation as opposed to it being a Q&A and digging deeper into some of the curiosities that people had. And a lot of the conversations then were more about building relationships, understanding people. So it wasn't about signing forms. It wasn't about, going through that manual or looking into the benefits, which is what happens on many kind of, first and second days or even in the first week. But a lot of the customers that we've been working with, they've been talking about how the interactivity has improved a lot once the person comes in on day one.
No, I would agree. And, look, we've all been the new employee getting the paperwork and all of that. And unless you're someone who's just out of college and never filled out these forms before, most people have done it. And to get them in advance and get them out of the way is important, because someone who's not, and I saw it a lot in the last, not Publicis, my company before with millennials, was I've got to go home and talk to my parents about my benefits. I've got to go ask them. They don't know. And you have to recognize that, and you can't mock it, right? There's a need. So one size does not fit all. So you kind of have to know where you can send stuff in advance and where it's, where you need to do it real time and walk people through something and make them, even if they go back and ask their parents or what have you, you're going back with a little bit more education than they had, beforehand. For the more senior person, they like all that stuff in advance. So what we did at HFA, though, we got feedback, is we were trying to do stuff in advance or do it really quickly to paperwork, take 15 minutes. Then we do a full, all day orientation. And we'd have people come in from every department. HR would drive it and do an overview. Then we'd have people come in from the licensing department or customer service or what have you. And what we got feedback on was, we had no idea that HR would even be this involved in a business, which was a great compliment. The second thing was that it was too long of a day for people to be spending doing orientation. So they asked us to cut it. So what we did was we did it then over the course of days to really have them do a little bit of learning and then a little bit of going back and meeting with people, and doing the work. So they would at least feel they would retain the information. So again, checking in, finding out what's working, what's not working, and then tailoring your program.
Yeah. I want to flip the kind of role. We've been talking about employees a lot. One of the things I think about a lot is the HR partners that we have, and what is the experience from their end, right? Because like you said, there's a lot of administrative stuff that is done, but it's not something that somebody's gotten into HR for. And we kind of strive to always take away a lot of the mundane work from that HR person's table so that they can focus on everything that we've been speaking about, doing more strategic initiatives, building relationships, keeping the employees happy in whichever way possible. So I'm curious to know from your team, the teams that you've run, what were the internal experiences? Do you feel like your teams were disengaged when they had to do a certain type of work versus some other type of work in HR itself?
Well, I will tell you that my team did not. You don't mind it because it's got to be done, but no one likes to do it. It's a pain in the neck. The problem with it is when you have to chase people down for the paperwork. So it now becomes, I have all these other things I do, and now I have to chase you down, grown up. If I don't get this back, you don't get paid. If you don't get paid, you're upset with me. You don't want me to tell you you didn't do something you were supposed to do. So that's where people get really frustrated on the administrative side. My team would much rather be talking to you about how to get assimilated, introducing you to folks, to be talking about, doing talent acquisition work for someone else. It's not all spent on the onboarding. An HR business partner's got a million things they worry about.
Yeah.
Compensation, right? Employee satisfaction, recruiting, compliance, etc. So to chase people for admin work is non-value add, but without getting paid, your employee experience is like zero, right? No one's happy because it works until it doesn't. And payroll is one of those areas, as is HR, is no one says, hey, thanks for this is great. But when you're not paid, people call you when something goes wrong. So the administrative aspect is not necessarily where people like to spend their time. But one of the administrative aspects that I can talk about that adds value is sort of data analytics.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do a lot of report generation. You have to input data to get stuff, but the data you get back that tells a story of what's going on, right? So if you have turnover reports that capture length of service, demographics, age, ethnicity, geography, all of that tells a story, right? Of where are people going, why are they going, and what initiatives can HR now do with this data to make it where turnover is less.
Yeah, I think you touched on this a little bit, but if you could dig into that a little bit more, because I like this topic. What were the kind of data points what are the data points that you find really interesting? And again, going back to our conversation about what execs kind of understand in knowing what the patterns are in the employee. Mm-hmm. You've talked about turnover. What are the other trends or patterns that are important to understand in organization when it comes to employee retention?
Yeah, so I look at departments. The department where it's happening, there could be a story there, right? And it may be a leadership issue, it may be a work balance issue. It's one of those things. I look at length of service tells you so much, because I think studies show once you're here 3 years, you're here for the long term. It's really those first 3 years that is so critical to keep somebody. And I don't know that people pay enough attention to that. And again, it talks to candidate experience, employee experience, onboarding experience, employee experience. What are you doing to pay attention to those folks? What are you doing to check in with them? What are you doing in the way of performance? And I don't want to talk about old school performance reviews, but performance discussions. Mm-hmm. Not are you doing bad, but what are you learning? What do you need to learn more of? What if you had more time and you could do something? What do you wish you could do? Those types of conversations, but they come with, are you giving performance reviews, or are you having performance discussions? So that kind of data comes out in an exit interview, not necessarily in one of my turnover reports. But who's staying? Are the millennials really the only ones leaving? Or are we now seeing, Gen X people leaving more? The forgotten generation, right? I mean, everyone thinks, we pay attention to millennials and the boomers out, but everyone in between is kind of the forgotten ones. So those are some of the things that I like to pay attention to. Obviously, all the other things like the diversity, age, ethnicity, all of that, gender, always important. But I can probably fix that stuff if I look at the other things more about why are people going? What's the time in which they're leaving?
Right.
And where are they going to? Is it a competitor? Is it a different industry? Or, what is it? So those are data points that interest me first, because then I can focus on all the other stuff. Because if I got a problem manager, it doesn't matter. You got a problem manager. Everything, it's going to be an issue for everyone.
Yeah, you get a good understanding of the fabric of the company once you kind of look at that entire data set and start seeing patterns between those.
Yeah, and a manager who, look, I've had it through my whole career. You can point to the date. You can show an exit interview to somebody. You can show the numbers, and I have had leaders say, well, they weren't that good anyway. Mm-hmm. They were a complainer. Well, okay, they were complaining for a reason. A broken clock is right twice a day, right? So you can't always discount everyone. So it's painful for anyone to get feedback, but feedback is the gift that keeps on giving if you embrace it and make change. But you have people who think it's weakness versus, look, there's just stuff you might be unaware of. We're telling you, this is what they're saying. They're gone, but make it better for everyone else. So we're not doing these exit interviews every week, every month, whatever it is, So
great point and great insight. I think I can keep talking to you about a lot of these things, but but I'd like to ask you, what are the few things that you're excited about as you kind of head into the future?
Well, I think what I'm excited about is, and I gave a talk at a women's organization about being an entrepreneur and having a voice in the workplace, and it speaks to women, but I really think it speaks to the HR profession, is to what we started off with, which was going back to the human element. I'm really excited to see so much focus by so many people, so many influencers on LinkedIn. And I don't really know what qualifies someone as an influencer. Do you just name yourself that? I'm not sure. But all the places I read, there is such a focus on people. And that to me is really encouraging. It's not, look, we run businesses. We have to make tough decisions. Difficult things have to be done. But we have to do it in a way that's really respectful and dignified and supportive of all employees, even if you're delivering bad news, right? So I feel like we're seeing a lot about soft skills, but they're basically, I think they're just human skills, life skills that you need to have, right? Being a kind person shouldn't have to be something that we're ashamed of. So I'm really excited the fact that we're putting more of a focus, and what I see is the focus on people. I see a lot of companies rebranding and in transformation and changing their models or what have you. And again, I think that's exciting work. And when you can work and really value everybody's point of view, even the person right out of school, because they see things with really maybe rose-colored glasses, but with really fresh perspective. I think we're seeing people value everyone, and we're getting less level conscious, and we're just hearing points of view. And I think that's exciting too, because for me, always working bottom up has been the way to work. I may have an idea, but I'm not in the trenches every day. So I have to ask the people who are doing the do all day long, what would make things better. And I've had people say to me, you have no idea what's going on. I'm like, I think I do, but tell me. And sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. Mm-hmm. So I think including everybody is really exciting. And we talk a lot about D&I, diversity inclusion. And I think where we can use some help is people tend to look at that as what you can see, the gender, the age, the ethnicity, right? But we have to look at diversity of experience, point of view, backgrounds, all of it. Sometimes you can't see it. You have to talk to it. And I think we're getting to a place where we're doing that. So I think those are a few things I'm excited about.
No, that's exciting. I'm hoping that we can be a part of making that future possible. So
I'm sure you can. I look forward to working with you at some point. Wherever I wind up next, I look forward to working with you.
Yeah, likewise. Anyways, thank you so much, Michele. This has bbeen great. As I said, I can continue the conversation and keep going, but I think we're running out of time here. But thank you so much. I look forward to working with you.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, likewise.